Alright, here we go. Another awesome how-to video. Now in a previous video you may recall, if you follow the channel, that I made a video on how to add the wire and everything for making underspin onto an existing jig head. Kind of a temporary fix. I used the 5-minute set epoxy glue. And that's, again, if you just already have one and you just want to add underspin to it. In this video, I'm actually going to show you how to make an entire jig head with the underspin built in, with modeling clay, Legos, plaster, some wire, and the other materials for the underspin, such as your blade, split ring, and swivel. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to take this wire and put it over here for now. Keep that plaster over there, Legos over there. And we're going to start with the modeling clay. So put all this aside, of course. Now with the modeling clay, you want to have some way of rolling it out. So I'll flatten it out first. Oh, and as far as what kind of modeling clay goes, this is the never hardening modeling clay. I'll leave a link in the description for this specific stuff, but you don't want the hardening stuff, because this allows you to constantly reuse, recycle. I've made hundreds of different molds with just this same pack of 1 pound modeling clay that you can get from Michael's or Amazon. This particular one was from Amazon. So again, non-drying or non-hardening modeling clay, and I'll leave the link in the description for this particular kind. But again, what you want to do is take a dowel or whatever you have handy and flatten this out to be about half of or I should say double the depth of the jig head that you want to mold to put the underspin on. So in this case, this is a 1/2 ounce bullet point jig head. So you could see what I mean by half is, or by double rather, the whole width of this is approximately, just get a tape measure out and look. So I'll just start at 1. So this is about a total 3/8 inch width, so almost half inch. So what I want is this modeling clay to be approximately 1/2 inch thick, because I, again, don't want when I put this in, I don't want to sink it all the way in. I just want this jig head to be sitting halfway into this modeling clay and half up. And again, I'll show you why. But now I take the Legos, and what I do for size is, for this one, I just want to make one jig head in there. I'm not going to make multiple. You could if you want, but just for the sake of this exercise, just going to do one. So once you have your base of your modeling clay bigger than the opening of the Legos, go ahead and sit the Legos on top of this clay, and you're going to push down just to get an imprint of what the base size is. So you push down, get that all sunk into that, again, non-hardening modeling clay. Pull it up, and you can see that trace of the inside border of the modeling clay. And then you're going to take a razor blade or a knife, whatever, and I cut on the outside or straight. See how there's this indentation right here? I'm going to cut as close to the middle or outside as possible, because when you put it in back in the Legos, you want the modeling clay to be pushed as far against the sides as possible, so when we pour the plaster, it doesn't leak out the bottom. So there's one side. Doesn't have to be perfect. 2 side. Okay, there you go. That's the last piece on that. Now, for putting in the control or the jig head, you want to mold and put underspin on. So I'm going to take this jig head, and you may see other molds where they pour it from the side or pour it like this or whatever, but I found it best to kind of have it at I don't know, like a 20 or 30 degree angle from the top, right? So about like this. And you're going to push this jig head down into it. Again, only halfway. So you only want to push it into where it's basically, well, that's just it, halfway down into the modeling clay. Don't push it all the way down. So about half the diameter of the hook's going to be in the clay, half the diameter of the jig head itself, you get the idea. So again, you want to just push this as solid into there as possible. You don't need to focus too much on the hook, and I'll show you why later. But definitely get all of the around the lead part. That's the most important thing, is sinking this jig head in and of itself into the modeling clay. Okay. Okay, so now I'll pick it up and just show. So now you can see how it halfway in, halfway out. Because what's going to happen is we're going to pour that plaster on top of this jig head, and then once that dries, you take it out, you flip it over, you pour the second base or a second layer of plaster on it, and that gives you your two-sided mold of your jig head. Okay. Now that that's all sunk in there, now what you want to do is you want to break a piece of the modeling clay off. I make a little triangle. It's kind of like a funnel. You need to make a funnel that's what you're going to pour the lead into. And again, with plaster, it has a very high heat tolerance. So lead, which is 624 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the minimum melting point of lead, not the pouring point, I want to add, just the melting point of lead. So plaster definitely handles that heat. As long as you're careful, these plaster molds will last forever, very long time. I'm actually still using plaster molds that my dad made 20, 30 years ago for some of the lures I still pour. So what you want to do is make this funnel, I know this is taking a while, but make that funnel to where it just barely sits on the top. So you're going to have it on the top right there, but you don't want it covering the jig head. You just want it barely touching the top of it, because you can always trim it and adjust it later after the whole mold's done. So we'll take a look at that. All right, see how that's just, it's going to touch the top up here and barely go into a little void right there. That's perfect. Now what you're going to do, take a cutter, razor blade, whatever, and cut this right in half. Okay? So this is going to be what we're going to use right now on this half. So here's the funnel where you're going to pour the lead into the mold. All right. Now here's where the fun part is. This is how you make the underspin into the mold. So you're going to take a piece of wire, right? Now I use this AFW tooth-proof stainless steel leader wire. You can get this from Barlow's. And again, I'll leave all the links in the description for all the materials used. But this is the tooth-proof stainless steel leader wire, size 218 or number 14, and it comes in a 30-foot pack, and you can get, it's about $7 or something like that. So now what you're going to do, you're going to take some cutters, and you're going to kind of match this. You want to kind of put this wire into the center, a little past the center here, and I'll show you why in a moment. You're going to line it up to maybe about right here, so about 3/4 of an inch, and you're going to cut that. Okay. Now, you can choose whatever angle you want. If you want it straight down, 90 degree from the hook, you can put this wire here. If you want it at a little bit of an angle, so it as you're pulling this jig head forward, let's say you're pulling right now and the line's going this way. So if you want it straight at a 90, put it there. If you want it straight that way, you can put it there so it's at a 45. I personally prefer at a 45. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this point of leader wire, and you're going to match where that corner of that jig head hook is. So if I'm looking here, that jig head hook's going up here, there's the eye right there. So if you go up, straight up and match it, there's the corner of the jig head, right, or the hook is right here. So I'm going to match that with this wire, and I'm going to pull that wire to about right there, and I'm just going to lay it right there. Okay, so you just, again, same thing, put it about halfway in. Okay, see how that's about halfway in there? Okay, perfect. And you're going to just leave it like that for now. Okay, now we're going to, so that's all set. Everything's in the modeling clay. Now I'm going to take this Lego piece, and here's the really important part of doing this with plaster. The modeling clay, when you're doing plastics, I've had several videos where I'm showing you how to make a plaster mold for pouring plastics. When you're pouring plastic, it's a much lower heat temperature. It's like 325 degrees or so for melting the plastisol. So that's all good and fine, and you can get away with 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch thick plasters, double sides. But when you're dealing with this, with lead, with this hot heat of 600 plus degrees, up to 800 degrees, you need to have each side of your mold about 1 inch thick. So you could see this, and again, this isn't exact science, but if I take my tape measure here, this is a total of about 1.5 inches, right? So this whole depth is about 3/8 of an inch for the modeling clay. So that goes up to about right there. So from the top down, you got about 1 inch. You're going to pour about 1 inch and 1/8 of plaster, and that holds the heat so the plaster mold doesn't crack. Okay, so again, you need at least 1.25 inches of or at least 1 inch, inch of plaster for these lead molds in order for them to be able to hold the heat of the lead. So now I'm going to go ahead and open this up a little bit, slide this modeling clay back in here. Make sure you push against the sides here. I mean, if some of the plaster leaks out, so be it, whatever. But you don't want a lot to leak out. Then you're going to take your, let's see, this one's going to actually go this way, sorry. Take your Legos, put those back into place. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and finish this 4 layers of Legos. You can use whatever you want. I just prefer Legos because I can change the sizes of it easily to whatever I'm molding. I could make it longer and taller. I can make it wider. You can do whatever you want with Legos as long as you have enough. Okay, so you see, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this plaster ready, and I'm going to pour all the way up to this top because you need, like I said, that thick. You need thick sides for your mold. All right, so that's all set. Now we're going to go ahead and do the plaster. So if you've never used plaster, strongly recommend you follow the instructions on the package. So I'm going to use a cup. I always start with this size stuff with a cup. It's better to have too much than too little. If you have too little, it's not gonna work. If you have too much, it's so cheap. It's fine to use too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour water in to start. I'm going to mix this, and again, there's a certain consistency I want, and you'll see it once I'm done mixing. I already tell I'm going to need more water, which is fine. It's better, way better to have too little water in there to start than too much, because then you have to add more plaster to loosen it up. And see how thick this is? You do not want that. You have to have it pour. Okay, so now I'm going to add some more water, little bits at a time. I actually forgot one critical part of this, before you pour the plaster. So as soon as I get done mixing this, I'm going to do that. I totally forgot about something. Once you start mixing this, you got about 5 minutes before it really starts setting, maybe 7 minutes before it really starts setting. So just make sure that you don't spend, if you're not ready to pour it after you mix it, to just be ready right away, because it's gonna start setting. A little more water. Now again, why you want it to be a little more fluid than peanut butter is because you need it to get through all these little crevices in here You don't want it, it can't be too thin because then it's going to be brittle once you dehydrate the mold before you pour the lead. And if it's too thick, it's just not going to get in the crevices, it's going to make for pretty bad molds. Alright, so I think we're good there. See how it drips only if you shake. That's what you really want. And there's a lot of bubbles in there right now, but don't worry about that. We're gonna shake or vibrate those out as soon as we're done pouring. Okay, so that's good right there. Now the part that I missed is, you don't have to do this, but I have found it's very beneficial to do it, is take some Vaseline or petroleum oil and put it a very, very, very thin layer onto the jig head. And what that does, it allows the plaster to not stick to it when you remove it. Because sometimes if you don't use an oil or use some type of release agent, it can pull some of the plaster with it when it's on the modeling clay or the lead. And so this allows that plaster to more easily come off and less potential for it sticking and chipping apart. Alright, so here we go. What I do first, I take this stir stick and I just get it around the spots that need the most help because of crevices. Make sure it's really in those crevices. Okay, alright, so that's good. Now I go ahead and pour. Okay. See, all the way up to the top. I do not want it to be lower than the top because I know how much plaster is needed in order to not allow it to crack and hold that 624 degrees of that, at least 624 degrees. That I keep my temperature on my Lee melting pot, my lead melting pot, at about the 8.5 to 9 mark, which is about probably 750 to 800 degrees. Okay. Now I'm just vibrating this again to get these bubbles out. Alright, so now that these bubbles are out, go rinse your plaster melting cup, whatever you're using, rinse everything off, and give this about 45 minutes to an hour. I typically give an hour, hour and 15, but the box packaging says usually give about 30 to 45 minutes. So I'll come back in about an hour, hour and 15 when this is done, and we'll open it up and continue the process, make the other side. Alright, it's actually been about an hour and 15 minutes. It's completely hard. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Take apart these Legos. This should slide right out. There we go. Get some of this overhang off. Okay. Now, go ahead and just kind of peel off this modeling clay. There we go. Okay. Now there's that little funnel piece, so we want that to stay in there, okay? So keep that there. But you could see that the jig came out perfectly. Little chip there. But you could see how it sits right in there. Okay. Now, once I get this taken out, get some of this leftover plaster off this. Get this wire out of here. Okay. Cool. Now what we're gonna do is drill a couple holes. Okay. We're gonna drill a hole about right here, right there, and right there. And what that does is when you pour that second layer of plaster on, it has something to lock into so it doesn't shift around, right? So we'll go ahead and I'll get the drill ready and come back and I'll drill a couple holes. Alright, so now that I have the drill bit in, we'll go ahead and drill a couple holes. So we'll go one right there, Go one right there, and one right there. Don't need a lot. Again, it's just to hold it in place when you put them together. Okay. That's perfect. That's good there. Alright. Now, let's see here. Got the wire, got the jig head. Let's go ahead and put this jig head back into the mold. Okay. Perfect. Just like it's supposed to be. Now we're going to go ahead and fill, or actually, sorry, before we do that, take the other half of this funnel that you had cut and put that right back on top of the one that is already in the mold. This again creates the other half of that funnel. Okay, that's good. Go ahead and take the wire and put this back into that slot where it was in the first half, or that top half. I don't know why I got a piece of lint or hair stuck on my nail. Alright. It's good right there. Alright. Now we'll go ahead and take the oil again, or this Vaseline or petroleum jelly, and we're going to do this entire top layer and the jig head. Alright, I think we're good to go here. Okay, so that's all set. I'm gonna set that aside right now. So just put that over there. Slide this back into the into the Legos, sorry. We're going to connect this all up and add a couple more layers of the Legos on. Alright, we're all ready to pour that second layer of plaster. So same as the first process, go ahead and put your water in to start with and mix till it's that peanut butter, like fluid peanut butter is what I call it. And again, just like the first one, I'm going to take this stir stick first and get all the plaster in the holes and small voids, just so I know it's in there. Okay, now I'll go ahead and pour. Done deal. Go ahead and tap this a while, get the bubbles up. Okay, we'll go ahead and let that sit for about another hour. Come back and see what we got. Alright, here we go. Next step, getting all these Legos off and seeing what we got here. Go ahead and open that open. Oh, it's not quite there. There we go. Slide it right out. And if you did it right and had enough oil in there, this is just going to split right apart. There we go. Alright. The two little pieces that were up top for the funnel, that came out. That's fine. Okay, get this little piece of wire out of here. Alright. And slide this guy out. Okay, there you have it. Top side, bottom side. And now, So the most important part of this entire process in making these jig molds with plaster is, unlike when you do that with plastic, the temperature and the mold isn't as important. But when you're dealing with lead, any bit of moisture that is left in the plaster mold will make the lead bubble and almost explode. So before you pour any lead into here, you must dehydrate this or let it evaporate. I recommend, if you're not going to use an oven, I recommend letting it dry for 2 full days, letting it evaporate 2 full days. If you do have a little like desktop oven or worktop oven or whatnot, I would put it in there for about 110 degrees for probably about 12 hours. Okay, if you live in a more more humid area, you may have to let it dry a little longer, maybe 12 to 14 hours, 12 to 18 hours. If you don't live, if you live in a drier climate, you can probably get away with 12. But again, if you have ability to use an oven, I would definitely recommend using a little oven that is down to, like I said, about 110 degrees for about 12 hours, 12 to 14 hours. But before you do that, there's a couple things you want to do while it's still kind of moist. You see these little, where we had the funnel in there, these little edges where there's shadows, like right there is a shadow. And if you turn it this way, you got shadows. The lead will grab onto those shadows and chip away the plaster when you go to take out. After you've poured some lead in there, it'll grab onto those edges and actually chip away at the mold. So just take a little screwdriver or something and just get rid of the edges, get rid of the shadows that you see. So right there you see that shadow. I'm just taking a screwdriver and just kind of sanding or grinding a little bit of this away, so that way the lead does not have anything to grab onto, and it'll just come right out after you've poured the jig head. Okay, so this is again one of the more important parts that I found with trial and error. If you don't get those shadows out or get those lips off, it's gonna pretty much ruin the mold. This is where the wire is going to go, so I'm just going to open that just a little bit. Okay. Now clean this up, make sure that's smooth. And I'll let this dry for a day or so in the oven. Like I said, probably about 12 to 14 hours in the oven at about 110 degrees, just to get all the moisture, as much moisture sucked out as possible. And then we'll do the next step. Alright, these have dried for about 12 to 14 hours in the oven. So now it's time to move on to the next steps. So first, what I'm going to do is, as you see here, this is specifically for this hook, but the mold doesn't have to be specifically for one hook size. So what I do is I'll take a razor blade, you could use whatever you want, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically sand off or remove from about this line or this section right here. I'm just going to remove or flatten this section right here. Same with on this side. What that's going to do is it'll allow you to use different size hooks within the same mold. So say this is a 3/0. Let's say you want to use a 4/0, or you want to use a 2/0, or you just want to use whatever size hook. You're not going to have this template here of the hook, so you can use whatever size hook and have it go farther down, farther up, without having to sit in this hook mold right here. So I'm not going to film the whole thing, but as you can see, you just kind of sand away at it. Feel free to use whatever tool you want, screwdriver, doesn't matter, but just kind of remove probably about 1/8 of an inch or so of this mold where that hook's going to go. Alright, so here's a perfect example of why I do it. So here's the mold that, or the jig that we molded. Here's that hook. This is a size, let's see, what is this? This is a size 2.0 Victory hook. So this is the hook that I use for it. So that fits in there just like that, right? Get this into that slot. This is the one that molded, so that fits in there just like that. Now, if I want to use a smaller hook, for example, I'm going to use a smaller swim bait, but I still want that the same ½ ounce weight, right? If I still want to use this, I can take a smaller hook. So this is a size, see which one is that? That's a size 1.0 Victory hook as well, but I can fit that in there as well. It doesn't go all the way down. It's not nearly as long as you can see. Let's see here. So there's the size difference. A little more than 1/8 of an inch, probably closer to 1/4 of an inch shorter, but you can use the same mold. Again, that's why I shave this off right here. But you got to shave at both sides. You can't just do one, you got to do both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do this side, and I'll be right back. Alright, so that's all taken care of, both sides. And some of you might be asking, well, why don't you sand the whole thing all the way across, right? Why not just go all the way across, make it easier, not just do a simple section? Well, because when you go to close this up, that hook's going to be in there, but you also want to be able to clamp this shut to squeeze as tight as possible when you're pouring the lead so it doesn't leak out. And so you really want to have two spots that connect each other. So this spot there, that spot there, to hold against each other, so there's not just an open space. So if I did it all the way across on both sides, this would be open all the way across, and when you go to clamp it, it could snap it, you know, those two pieces on the bottom, because there's a void down here but connected up here, and you go to clamp it, it could squeeze together and snap the mold in half. So you want to leave these two parts of the mold touching each other as well as the rest of it. Only have this open where the hook can go in. Now, to make the underspin part with the wire. So we have the wire indentations right here. But what you want to do is make sure you have this little space open right here. So see how it's not quite into the jig head part yet? There's a little, see right there, it's not quite connecting. Make sure to open that up. So I'm just going to take a little screwdriver and open that up. Now you see how it's open? Same with this side. Make sure that's open and going into the jig head. Alright, now for the part with the drill. So you can see here with this underspin, or with this wire, that the wire actually sits in there. So what you do is you make a cavity on both sides. So make a cavity from probably, depending on how long you want your underspin wire, probably like a third of an inch and out. So 1/3 of an inch and out. Make the cavity. I'm going to use the drill to do that to start it, and then I'll sand it out or grind it out, whatever you want to call it, to make the cavity so the wire and the swivel will sit in that cavity. So I'm going to go ahead and start about right there. Like I said, about 1/3 of an inch away. Start slow at first and just kind of drill a little bit of a cavity in there. A little bit deeper. Okay, and then do it again over here, next spot. Next spot. Oop. And you don't have to use a drill, you can use whatever you want, but again, it's not to be perfect, it's just meant to build a cavity in there. Okay, so that's a start to the cavity. Now all I'm going to do is take my screwdriver, or whatever you're using, and just kind of bore this out. One thing to note is you can do this process before you actually let it dry out. That way it's a little more softer. I chose to do it this way and kind of Usually I do it when it's softer, but I'm now regretting the decision to do it after when it's harder, because it's just not doing it the way I want to. But as ugly as that is, it's not pretty by any means. Sorry about that. Like I said earlier, when I'm making things on video, it's never as pretty as when I'm doing stuff for myself. Alright, so that's that side. Now I'll go ahead and do the same on this side. Alright, all done. I mean, see, like I told you, when I'm not on camera, so much cleaner than this one. So irritating. Okay, for the next piece, what we're going to do is we're going to add the swivel to this wire. So what you need is either some wire benders, or, as what I use, 2 pairs of pliers. So I'm just going to take 1 pair of plier, right about there. Take the other one, make an eye with it, or a partial eye. Okay, so that's done. Squeeze that a little tighter so you got a little bit of an eye there. Don't want it huge. Don't need it huge. Okay. Now I've seen on videos people use, cut a hook off, use that, or use wire, and just make a, basically cutting one of these off, but a straight shank hook, bending this eye out, putting the swivel in there, closing it back up. But since I use the leader wire for my rigs and my A-rigs and whatnot, I have this leftover wire, so I figure why not just use this. Alright, then I take it into the vise here. Make sure not to pinch the swivel. You don't want to pinch the swivel, of course. Then I just take my pliers, wrap it around a couple times. One is, all you need, but since I have the wire, I wrap it 3 times, 2 or 3 times. Okay, then I'm just going to take a pair of cutters, wire cutters, and I'm going to cut this piece off. Make sure that you cover it or wear eye protection so that piece of wire doesn't go into your eye. Then take these pair of needle nose, just kind of crimp this wire down so it's not sticking out. There you go. Okay, there you have it. There's your wire with your swivel on it. So now what you want to do is we're going to take this hook. We're going to take the hook that you're going to use to make the jig head. You're going to set that in there. And I want to measure this. Okay. So you want this wire to sit in the cavity, of course. And if you did it right, which this one isn't completely right, but we'll make it work. So you want this wire just to sit right there and cut it to where it's just on the inside of that hook. And then you're going to take it and you're going to bend it, bend the wire. So I have that there. Make sure that this is as straight as possible. So you want this eye angled down, and then you're going to take the wire and just, sorry, get back into screen. Okay, bend this wire down at a 90. Okay, see how that's just barely at a 90 there? Okay, and then since I don't need this big of a 90, I guess I can leave it, why not? Alright, and you're going to set this right in there, right in the cavity. Alright, we're all situated now. So ultimately what you want to do is you want to make sure that that wire is sitting level to the hook. So if I tilt it a little bit, you could see that that wire is straight. And then all you're going to have to do, and I'll show you, but all you're going to have to do then is you cover this back up when you're ready, when the lead's heated, and you pour. So without further ado, what I'll do next is heat up the lead, and we'll go ahead and start pouring some. Alright, the lead's all ready to go. The molds are all ready to go. So that's the mold I made just for this video. This is a separate mold that I made, and as you can see here, this one is cut all the way across. So when I do close it, this is what I wanted to show, that it can, see how it can open and close right there? And if you squeeze it in the wrong direction, it can break. But I want to show you real quickly on this one, the wire itself, if done properly and matched up and lined up right, that wire will actually go right over the hook and lock it into place right there, so it just kind of sits perfectly. Now the one that I made for the video doesn't quite do that, but it doesn't really matter that much. But since I have the melted lead here, I'm going to now put a mask on and go to work here. You will not hear my voice. I'll do captions, but just, again, lead poison, so I don't want to breathe that in. The mask on, and we'll go ahead and pour these jig heads. All right, we are back. We are back. All right, so I did 2 examples in there. Again, had the mask on because I don't want to breathe those lead fumes in. But I did 2 samples. So here's the one that was made with the mold that I made for this video. This was the one I made prior that I've used for quite a while now. This was I think my second one that I made. But here's this one that I made with this video. Turned out pretty clean. Actually, it turned out better than this old pour did in terms of the eye. There was some lead in the eye on that one, but as you can see, there it is, built-in underspin, not glued in, nothing. It's in the jig, or yeah, in the jig head. So that's all clean. Now let's go ahead and put the split ring and the blade on. It's very simple. There's that. Slide that down and on. Alright, blade next. Okay, blade going on. There you have it. Your own DIY underspin out of a plaster mold. Put the swim bait on it with the Nova Stone powder paint jig head. That's what it looks like. Piece of cake, easy, cheap. Again, here's this one. But again, now you see why I take take this part out. But when I did it with this one, this is when it's completely sanded across. You have this wobbling. And if you happen to grab it down here with those clamps and squeeze it too tight, that could snap and break. Fortunately, this one hasn't yet, so that's good. Put that one over there. But again, this is the one that I want, or that I believe is the best example for what to do with just this space. So as you see, it closes up and stays tight. It doesn't shift at all. So yeah, there's your DIY underspin. You could look at previous videos to see how I put this powder paint on. Pretty simple, straightforward, self-explanatory with the Nova Stone powder paints. But yeah, DIY jig head with underspin. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a bunch of likes and thumbs up and all that fun stuff. But yeah, thanks for watching. Take care. Now go get some. You.